Hello and welcome to a new video. In 2016, the world was introduced to two rather peculiar games. The first being a rather unfriendly romp through a vision of hell never realized in gaming before at the level of brutality and visceralness that was displayed, and the other being a biomechanical labyrinth in an alien-like world inspired by the likes of Giger and Beksinski. This was back in the year 2016, and the assumption was that these games would almost be rivaling each other, two fantastic worlds filled with meat and bodies and body horror. However, Agony would release 2 years later following a successful Kickstarter campaign, and Scorn would release 6 years later, also following its own successful Kickstarter campaign. In fact, Scorn took so long to develop that Agony was able to come out with an unrated version and then a spin-off called Succubus. And so the dream of these two games being rivals was never realized, and contrary to what TV tropes would say, fans of Agony don't really have much of an opinion of Scorn, and fans of Scorn don't really have much of an opinion on Agony. But the question might be in some people's minds as to if these two games did really come out at the same time, what would happen if their main characters got into a fight? Between Scorn Guy in Scorn and Nimrod in Agony, who would walk away from the blood-soaked arena alive? I mean, it's obviously Scorn Guy. He has guns, Nimrod doesn't, and assuming they're the only two people in the battlefield, Nimrod isn't going to be able to let his soul leave his body and possess another. But what about Agony's second protagonist? Because following completing the game, or just starting the game in the unrated version, you have access to what's known as Succubus mode. No longer the weak and very easily killable Nimrod, you now play as a demon traversing through hell and hacking and slashing her way through the horrors. Well, to be honest, I think it's still Scorn Guy who has the edge, cause again, he has guns, and the Succubus in Succubus mode isn't as fearsome as someone who can kill you from afar. Alright, but what about the spin-off title Succubus? One that expands upon her combat abilities and powers. Could she take on Scorn Guy after that? And this is where the answer becomes more complicated and far more one-sided in the other direction. The Succubus, known as Vydija, is, surprise surprise, a succubus. She's basically the wife of the previously named Nimrod in an open relationship and a devotee to the Red Goddess, the ruler of hell before Nimrod. She has a multitude of weapons at her disposal, including magic powers, and she was born on June 9th because fucking of course she was. Scorn Guy, on the other hand, is a being with his own set of weapons, mainly ranged weapons and one melee weapon, but this is where things get a little bit complicated because there were going to be more weapons in Scorn. And while unfortunately Ebb Software have cut these out of the game, I'm going to use them in consideration with this death battle between these two characters. In Succubus, what powers she has is linked to what outfit she wears, and I'll be having her wear her default outfit, which means she'll have her default powers. Additionally, I'm going to give her her starting weapons. These are all the weakest in the game and don't offer much benefits, including no additional health or charge abilities, but believe me, this is not going to hinder her ability to face this battle in the slightest. The first weapon at her disposal is a set of blades that's able to quickly hack and slash anything unfortunate enough to be too close to her at the time. They can also serve as a ranged weapon, having some homing abilities when thrown directly at an enemy. She has a sword and a scythe, which are a sword and a scythe, but she also has a ranged magic spell in which she shoots out a fireball at a general direction. The other big thing at her disposal is a special shield spell. It's able to absorb some damage, but not all of it. But beyond that, she's simply fast, fierce, and has a lot more knowledge about how to handle fighting. She even has these short dash moves that allow her to maneuver through the arena pretty quickly. And she does have her own special arena, allowing her to train in combat with various different enemy types, both normal human beings and fearsome demons. Hell is an unforgiving place, and she's learned to be just as unforgiving. The worst thing that can possibly happen to you in a confrontation against her is getting too close, but even keeping your distance isn't going to help you out all that much. Where the Succubus thrives in close combat, Scorn Guy is more of a ranged person. He has a pistol that's able to fire 6 shots before it needs to be manually reloaded. He also has his coral thing that has 6 tentacle things that allows him to heal. He has a shotgun that carries 3 shots before needing to be manually reloaded. And for the times when he isn't running away and has to get close, he has this piston gun that's able to fire off 2 hits before needing to cool down and recharge. It doesn't, however, have very much range and is definitely something to be used as a last resort for most of the fights. But at least it helps with close quarter combat, and the last tool in his arsenal is a grenade launcher, one he gets from a boss fight. And yeah, it's a grenade launcher. It has 4 shots before needing to be manually reloaded, and the only way to do that is to nick it off of the corpses of those cyborgs. But now it's time to talk about the parasite in the room. The parasite is what holds Scorn Guy's coral thing, the thing that allows him to heal himself and grab ammo on the spot. But it's also a major hindrance, often hurting Scorn Guy in the process of its transformation. For the purpose of the video, I'm going to say that Scorn Guy doesn't have the parasite on him. Maybe he's wearing a rather thin coat during the fight that has decent pockets to store his healing coral in. It helps that one of the 2 additional weapons that I want to factor into this fight requires a parasite to be removed as part of a story element. It's a cybernetic augmentation that effectively turns his arm into a gun, able to fire off a shot when he moves his wrist down. The other is the handle of the gun with an inflatable attachment that spews out volatile biological matter. This is definitely a close-range weapon, and while you would think that spewing hot liquid shit on the Succubus wouldn't really do all that much to her, there are actually enemies in the game that fire shit down from above that damage her, so this is legal for combat in this scenario. If there's one thing that Scorn Guy has the advantage of, it would be durability. This man can take a punch. He's been tossed around, strangled, he's had this creature growing inside of him, and at one point, most of his chest is flayed open, and he's still able to hobble around Paulus until he gets to that medical station. We're not putting up with the parasite in this fight, however it's also worth pointing out that he is able to kind of jog around even with it latched onto his back. The parasite is the first Scorn Guy you play as in the prologue of the game, so he's effectively fighting with another human being attached to him, or Scornian being, or parasitic being. Something somewhat roughly his size, actually a little bit larger than him. So he's durable and he's strong, that's the point of this segment. However, despite this, he's far less proficient in combat, not only because his weapons are limited in ammunition and don't automatically recharge like the Succubus's spells do, but because he was quite literally born a few hours ago in the game. It may even be the case that he and people like him aren't even supposed to use weapons, and those are reserved for the higher-up Scorn people. So in this visceral battle of the Titans, both meaty and erotic, the question is, who comes out on top? And I don't think it's a surprising answer to say it's Vydija. Even when severely limiting her abilities, she's still far more powerful than Scorn Guy. Yes, he's durable, but she can take a punch too. Yes, he has ranged weaponry, but his best ranged weapon, the pistol, needs time to hone in and aim at a spot, whereas she can be dashing around and tossing her own ranged attacks. In many ways, this isn't a surprising answer at all. Succubus is a fast-paced hack-and-slash game where you're supposed to brutalize as many people as possible. Scorn, meanwhile, had to have a trailer where they got Doug Bradley to outright say it's not a shooter, and people still treated it like a shooter and got mad when it wasn't a good shooter. In fact, the majority of combat encounters in the game can be outright avoided. The boss fight with the Krangs are basically the only mandatory fight you need to participate in. It does seem like Ebb Software initially planned on there being more enemies to contend with, ones that required slightly different playstyles that would have allowed us to better assess Scorn Guy's fighting capabilities, but that is not in the game, and unlike the weapons, it's not as easy to judge how that would have affected the fight, if at all. And really is a question of if at all, because Scorn Guy likely would have been using basically the same weapons he has at his disposal now, and they're not able to contend adequately enough against the Succubus anyways. Meanwhile, Vydija is faster than Scorn Guy, even with her basic movement speed. She seems to be stronger than Scorn Guy, and this is all with a basic arena that doesn't make use of all of her abilities, such as being able to telekinetically lift and move objects, or to kick people into environmental hazards. Like, if there were spikes in the arena, she could just kick Scorn Guy into them and that would probably be the end of the fight. It's an unsurprising succubus sweep between one character who's in a high adrenaline action game and another character who's in a slow methodical puzzle game. So yeah, Vydija wins, she kills Scorn Guy. Or maybe it ends up being like this piece of fan art that someone from the Scorn Discord asked me to put in the video. So there you go, pal, it's in the video. If we ever do get an expansion or more material related to Scorn, I might revisit this topic, but I think the answer is pretty obvious and done for. So I hope you enjoyed the video, that gave you something to think about and otherwise entertained you. Take care.